This is the Team Objection podcast for May 1st, 2020, episode 435, and you're going to notice a few things are strange from the word go. Number one, Sean is not here. Number two, it's Friday, not Thursday, when episodes normally post. There's a couple of reasons for that, and let's just get them out of the way up front, and then we'll talk about why Michaela's here. Because there's she this
there
way.
I be.
On the screen, she's
here
this
I
way.
am.
She's over here to me, but to you, she's over there.
Yes, and he's over there in my perspective.
It's complex, okay?
Yes.
There's a lot
Our
of things
setup
going
is
on.
very elaborate.
This episode is going to be our full review of Trails of Cold Steel 3. We didn't think it was appropriate to just stuff it into the credits, especially because the credits were actually pretty
They
short.
were really short.
I mean,
They were
it's
a
still
lot.
like 6 minutes or so, and it's a good song, and it had plenty of stuff in it, but like...
I feel like it was shorter than the other games. Maybe that's just me, but it felt shorter.
Maybe a smidge. I'd be interested to go back and look. I think they were close. But anyways, Cold Steel 3 is the benefit of this episode. It's going to have an hour's worth of content to it, so it gets to shine.
Yes.
I need not tell you in advance there will be full spoilers here as we discuss everything that we went through in our blind playthrough on the YouTube channel on which you're watching this video, or if you're not, you're listening to the podcast and you can go check it out on YouTube, the playthrough and this. So, we're going to break it down by categories much like we did with Persona 5 and some other recent reviews that we had done. And we're going to give our impressions and our final score, talk about what we're looking for in 4. All that good stuff is going to happen here. And then, we'll resume regular service on Thursday next week. But this is basically happening such that anybody who watched the YouTube series watched the last part yesterday, and now the review is going up today on a Friday. So that's why the programming switch.
It's very seamless, though. You won't notice a thing.
I hope so. I mean, it's not all that different, really. It's just a day off, and we're doing a slightly different topic, but we've done full-blown video game reviews on here before, so, it can't be that strange.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it's going to be strangest for the people who watch the playthrough and don't normally watch the podcast, because they're going to be like, wait a minute.
They didn't talk about it.
Who are these two?
Yes.
Where's Reen? Put him on the screen.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to dive into the first category. We'll just take a category by category, and then we'll move our way through it, work our way up to the big stuff like story, characters.
There's a lot to talk about
What
with
happened
those
at the end.
sections. Yeah.
But we decided to go in reverse order in sorts. So we're going to do some of the lighter stuff first. And I think the first thing that comes to mind, because it's one of the first things you really see, is graphics. There is no question in my mind that it's one of this game's biggest pluses because it almost had to be by necessity. It's on a next-gen system. It's no longer cut down by the restraints of having to be on multiple systems like a Vita.
Yikes.
So
Yeah, I forgot about that. with
yeah,
old games.
and instead now you get this much, much prettier game. Now, is it on par with mega AAA titles from studios with much, much bigger budgets and staff and all that? No. It looks like a PS3.5 game, kind of. But nonetheless, I think it looks plenty pretty. It's a huge step up over the first two games, which is appreciated. It runs smoothly almost all the time. And
Almost. It really doesn't chug that much.
no, a couple
Handful
of
of
spots, and there was a lot going on with a bunch of different models, so I don't really begrudge the game that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the graphics were a big-time step up.
Yeah, and I think something nice about the graphics too, having them upgraded, is that I think the characters finally resemble how they look in their artwork. It was always jarring in 1 and 2 when you look at this gorgeous artwork of the characters and you're playing the game and they don't really match. I mean, some characters don't even have the same hair color. Reen, I'm looking at you.
Yes, he's all over the place, isn't he? Black, blue, purple, white,
yeah.
who knows? Gray.
Yeah, so now I think they finally match, and I think it's really nice to see. Like they actually they just look really good. I think the models, it gives the characters a lot more expression and personality because you can see that difference across all of them.
It's easy to forget having done so many parts, which I think was something like 130. I didn't actually count how many it was going to be. It's a little over 130 if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
But we did talk in some of the earlier videos about how nice it was just to see better rendered pathways and little articulations on the character designs, like pieces of their outfits that would actually move when they ran, or extra detail on similar character models. Like Claire, for example, comes to mind quickly as somebody who's wearing pretty much the same stuff as in 2, both of her outfits, but both of them have substantial upgrades to where you're like, yeah, like she just looks better in general.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that little bit of detail on everybody is just appreciated. It's a little stuff, but this series is all about little stuff. it has its big important moments. I'm not saying it's just like little details the whole time, but it excels in the world building, and it has the most important NPCs that you've ever seen for people that you talk to like twice. Like you've never seen that much character in somebody you may never speak to if you just skip past them. Yeah. So they do a good job with the little stuff, and I think now the character models kind of match that vision for the world and everything else.
Yeah.
So graphics, very good.
Yeah, and especially when you think back on where the series has come from, where it started with Sky and the evolution, it's been very nice to see.
Yeah, that's why I'm still kind of hoping that long term they might do a remake of Sky and or bring the Crossbell games over, but with the other engine.
These graphics, oh my god,
that would be super neat.
That would be good incentive for me to actually revisit those games and try to play them.
But I don't know if I get to be selfish like that, because at this point it'd be nice just to have the Crossbell games, even if they're in their current form.
Yes, that's also true. We'll take what we can get, guys. We're not too picky on those.
Yeah, I'm not. Obviously, more is better, but I'm not like, I want those games in HD 1080p or I'm not going to play them. Like, clearly that's not the case.
Mm-hmm.
I went and played the third Sky game after I had played Cold Steel 1 and 2.
Oh, how'd that go?
It wasn't phenomenal. There are little quality of life upgrades that the Cold Steel series has that I missed, but it was by no means like unplayable or anything.
Okay.
What's interesting is that the Sky and Crossbow games both kind of use that 2.5D isometric, like diagonal, sprite-based thing. Yeah, so like it holds up decently well. I mean, it's Sky especially, the first one shows its age when you go back to it, but not in like a terrible way. It's just it's been a while, and it shows. Yeah, and that's okay. I mean, I go back and play Chrono Trigger every few years, and I don't go back now and I'm like, oh my god, Chrono Trigger looks like trash.
The pixels hold up beautifully in that game, I will say.
Oh, yeah,
Chrono Trigger looks incredible.
I mean, that game still is and may never not be my pick for the best game of all time. So
it's so good.
Yeah.
But that's like top tier example, you know.
Right. I mean, if I compare something to Chrono Trigger, I'm actually flattering it. I'm not trying to give it no fair shakes. I'm going, hey, this is up there in the realm of the thing that I think is the best video game ever made. So where's the harm in that? I do think it would be nice to see this in an even shinier format, but again, I recognize that Falcom only has so much to work with, and as such, I'm not super broken up about it, but there are times where I think like, man, it'd be nice if this just looked like 10% better. And that's the whole series. So that's not a Cold Steel 3 complaint. And again, I don't think I hold that against Falcom by any means whatsoever. It still looks plenty pretty, especially here, and having gone through the Sky series and the first two Cold Steel games, this is enough of a jump for me. I'm content with where this is at now. I'm like, yeah, this is fine.
Yeah.
No qualms.
Very good step up.
That sort of segues into gameplay. One of the nice things about this is that this is familiar gameplay, both as the series as a whole and in particular compared to Cold Steel 1 and 2, with a few new tweaks. So I think we should address the new tweaks first and then just talk about how gameplay fared compared to the rest of this particular series in Cold Steel. So first of all, what do you think about Brave Orders?
I liked the Brave Orders. I like them in theory. Some of them in practice are absolutely broken. Like, I think the game might not be the best balanced, because there are some broken ass orders later, and you can just break the game. I mean, we beat the final boss and it was like nothing. It was a cakewalk. And then I think of the first two games where like I struggled with the final. Of course, I wasn't the one playing, but point being is I think the Brave Orders and by extension the breaking system is maybe not the best balance, but I like them in practice. I like that all the characters have like unique what's the word? Like things that you can summon into the battle and change it up. It's cool. And everybody has a unique thing that they offer based on their skill set. So like, I liked it. It's a cool little character like detail, I guess, but I don't know if it was very balanced.
It was nice that they all kind of were in line with the characters that used them. So like to your point, you know, it wasn't like Fee came in and gave you a spellcasting boost.
Right.
Because that would have been weird.
Yeah.
But instead, it was all kind of just in character with them. And again, it helped you with a boost that would make sense with what you'd expect from them.
Yeah.
I have a hard time reconciling the balance issue, and you've brought up the breaking, which is the other thing that is the primary new thing here.
Yep.
I'm struggling with the idea of which led to the system falling apart more, because it's definitely both. I don't think without the ability to abuse stuff like accelerate that you would be quite so reliant on breaking, but being able to break enemies and prevent them from having turns thus means that you have every incentive to extend that effect as long as you can.
Yeah.
So I don't really know which side of that I fall on. I feel like if you remove breaking from the game and they just have the orders and you adjust the balance a bit for it, that I think there's less likelihood of being able to ruin certain boss fights.
I would agree. I think the breaking is probably the one that breaking broke the system. Yes. I think it did, because you can just abuse it so quickly, and you have characters that can like 300% break damage, and it's just like all this stuff. It just didn't feel very balanced.
I leaned into the system pretty hard, especially with my orbment setups.
Yeah.
But I did not really use orders that led to faster breaking. It actually could have almost been worse.
You're right. Yeah, that's true.
Because a couple of those orders gave like plus 300% break damage for X amount of turns. And if we had done that and then still farmed enough BP to then throw it to Sarah's order, for example, to then give everybody additional turns, then, I mean, there's just nothing stopping us. But when you think back on the playthrough and how the game went, when was the last time we were challenged?
The beginning with the spiders in the forest?
That is an correct answer. And yes, I know that's not the correct use of "and." I just like saying it. That is one of the times. There was a couple other times after that.
I'm trying to think of the other ones, but that was the first one that popped into my head just because it was so hard. Like, I think this game had the biggest, like, gap. Not gap, but like the beginning is really hard because you don't have all the tools. And then once you get all the tools, it's like really easy. And I think it was very noticeable in this game.
So I think you're right, but only because that happens in all of these games, but it was more pronounced here.
I think it was more pronounced
so you
here.
feel it more than you did in past games, because there's always that thing. Like back when the beginning is 2, when you first get Reen back and you have like one attack and you dropped all your orbments and your fishing log fell out somewhere in the mountainside, you don't have a whole lot of options at your disposal, and you can feel that. And then later on in the game, as you start getting super rare gems and stuff, it's like, oh yeah, I'm super powerful now.
Yeah.
And that's good because you have enemies that require you to be super powerful.
Yeah.
Well, here I don't know if that ever happened. We got pushed 2 more times. There was that first boss at the keep.
Oh my god!
That we had
you're
to cheese
right.
out because it seemed like he couldn't move when we had people positioned in the corners.
You had to be like in the corners of the map. Yeah, that was awful. I forgot about that.
Because he was destroying me, and then eventually I was like, wait a minute, when I have moved this person here and this person here, he just moves in place. Like he just skips his turns.
Yeah, he like literally can't figure it out. It's kind of hilarious.
But we were getting absolutely wrecked in that fight.
Yeah.
And the other time was when they had somebody who could cancel out everything. We had that boss fight about, 2/3, maybe 3/4 of the way in. God, what was it?
I'm trying to remember.
I think it was at the end of the next to final dungeon. Was it because the dragon was doing it?
I think so. Oh, the dragon. You're right. Yes.
Because he was doing cancel all, and that was ruining our buff strategies.
Yes.
That was taking Emma out of the equation because it was interrupting her spell casting.
There was one team in particular of the 3 that had a pretty tough time.
Yeah, because they had to split the teams into 3, which was cool. And
really cool.
I actually kind of liked the fact that it made us challenged a bit there.
Yeah.
But you could see the haves and have-nots on full display there. And that's the only other time. And that was the first time in a while where we had really been pushed as far as difficulty. Because, I mean, we made jokes out of some of those fights.
We did.
Like, Aryan Road and the Stall Ritter were absolute jokes.
And they really should not have been.
No, and that's a shame, because that takes away from what should have been a much cooler moment. And when I think back on this, and we'll talk more about this when we get towards the end, that's sort of a self-created problem. Now, maybe you can argue it's a balance issue and not something I've done, but either way, taking away from some of those big moments because the battles were a cakewalk in some cases, I think really hurt what the build was over the course of the game. And that's a shame.
Yeah. Agreed.
I do like all those ideas in concept.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to sort of like wear enemies down and then knock them out at a certain time to take the turn advantage for yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Sounds great on paper.
It sounds great on paper.
And even in execution, it works well. It's just it works too well. And the orders, not taking up a turn, working with a certain number of points, competing against things like rush and follow-up attacks and all that for the Brave Order points that you had before. So you have to kind of decide, which approach do you want to take more often. Again, perfectly fine in execution, or perfectly fine in theory. Execution, I don't know.
Yeah, it's tough.
Beyond that, there's not a whole lot else that's new. I mean, you can argue that there were shinier S-crafts. That's sort of a graphics thing as well, but they're also just a lot more elaborate in their animation and their setup, and those are greatly appreciated. Those were nice.
Yeah.
Is there anything else?
Vantage Masters.
Well, I mean, that is part of the gameplay.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't actually play it, but it looked fun. It looked fun to play. What was the card? It's much better than Blade Master. Blade. Yes.
Oh, from the first, yeah.
Yes.
Blade
Sorry.
and Blade 2, the aptly named Blade 2.
Yes.
Yeah.
Much better than those.
Much more depth, fun to challenge people out in the world. It vanishes the last third of the game. And
you're right. It's like not even there at all, which is kind of a shame.
that's a difficult one because it doesn't make sense for it to be in a lot of parts of the end of the game. You can't be like, I'm
true.
descending this dungeon and then this is the final battle. I just fought Arian, Roden, McBurn, and now I'm going to fight and Fee with duels and children's card games. Like that would never make sense. It would throw you off the pacing. So I think it was sort of inevitable, and it's even possible that we missed one. Again, it was a blind playthrough, so if there was a challenge later in the game that I missed, that's certainly possible.
Well, it's true. What's her face? Orier, Kurt's mom was supposed to be the last one, and we didn't get to do that.
Yeah, we didn't have
a card
we didn't have the full collection. So there was one there towards the end that would have helped with that a little bit. So it would have taken up some of that.
Yeah,
I don't really have any qualms with it. I thought, like you said, a whole lot deeper than Blade, even Blade 2, which was an iteration of the first one. I had a couple new cards, but was fundamentally the same. This was brand new, and while I don't know if I'd ever want to play an offshoot of it as like a standalone game, like a Hearthstone or whatever.
Yeah, sure.
I do think it was certainly very good.
Yeah.
Like, I never got to the point where I had a chance to challenge somebody. I was like, ugh.
Right.
Oh, man, this again? Like, I enjoyed it. So that's a solid addition. That's a good one to call back on, because I don't know if I would have said those words in this review. It's not like it was that forgettable. I enjoyed it. It was just that it had been so long.
It has been a while.
We had to break the video up into like 45-minute segments. So the last time we played a Vantage Masters match was probably like 8 weeks ago.
Probably.
So it's easier to forget anything in that span, especially in light of what's happened to the world since then.
Oh boy, some things have happened.
Yeah. So, but this is meant to be escapism, so let's not talk about that.
Yeah.
Is there anything else as far as new gameplay stuff that I'm forgetting?
I don't think so. I think it was just Vantage Masters. I think that's the only one I had.
I guess you can argue it's not really gameplay specifically, but it's more like game systems.
Divine Knights or the Soldats?
That's a good one to put in before we get to mine. Soldat battles are better.
Yeah. The fact that you can have other Soldats fighting with you is cool, and it changes up the battles a little bit. And the more support options were kind of neat as well as a result of that.
Yeah, it kind of felt like a way to get more characters involved too. Like, instead of it just being Reen all day, every day, and now it's like, okay, well, you have him, but occasionally you don't have him at all, and you have everybody else able to support, and then even people who don't pilot anything can still get in the mix, like you mentioned. So
yeah,
very few qualms with that, and the addition of like multi-way ones also felt like a strong choice because there was nothing against the one-on-one ones. I mean, they were fun watching these kind of duels of sorts, but I like the fact that you could throw in this additional strategy and manipulate more turn order type stuff just because you had maybe 3 allies now.
Yeah.
The one I was going to bring up is just the way that quests were presented, particularly hidden quests.
Oh, God.
Finally,
yes.
after
right.
7 fucking games, the hidden quests are findable on the map. You still have to kind of go off the beaten path. They're not generally in areas that you would go for the main story, but having them with a marker to start them instead of having to talk to every NPC at every opportunity between every game segment is tremendously appreciated, especially for me, who's played more of these games than you have.
It's true. I'm not nearly as burned out on the hidden side quest problems, so I appreciate it, but probably not as much as someone who's played all the games and had to deal with that, because that is obnoxious. So yeah, it's very nice of them to do that. Just small little quality of life changes like that are very, very helpful. And it's like about time. We're in 2019 or 2020. Sorry, Christ, 2020. We should have these features already, so it's good.
I would imagine there are probably some folks who lament the fact that it's not the way it once was. The hardcore types or just traditionalists, and I understand. I mean, by their very nature, it's sort of oxymoronic to call them hidden quests when they're now visible. I get that, but to me, it would have been different in something like Cold Steel 2 in the second half, where you could basically go anywhere. So, like, you're not just tied into the idea of this linear mode where it's like, if you miss this hidden quest, that's it. You're done. You didn't talk to this NPC during this maybe small to medium window. That quest is gone forever.
Yeah.
You can avoid that now if you want to seek them out. And as always, if you're not interested in them, you just skip them. You don't have to get all the rewards. That's fine.
Yeah.
So that was very, very appreciated because it meant that we missed 4 quests.
I think so, and one of
3?
them was like not even our fault, but we just didn't have money to buy the stupid recipe. So
Yeah, and I had missed one in the very beginning without realizing it, and
Yep.
I probably ended up missing a couple more recipes. We never actually tried to turn them in, so I'm not sure what the final total on that was, but we were pretty damn thorough for having almost no guides. We resorted to them a couple of times more to see just what things meant as far as like how do we get to these final bonding scenes, but
Mhm.
for a blind playthrough, I think we got probably like 97 or 98% of the AP, which I'm
It's-
happy with.
Yeah, which is fantastic.
It meant we were thorough, but we didn't have to be so thorough that we were bogging down a YouTube playthrough by running into NPCs for hours or doing that on the side when the cameras were off and adding to the playtime.
Yeah.
So all of that was much appreciated, especially for a blind playthrough like we were doing it.
Yeah.
Let's talk music. This is a tricky one for me because, and as we've talked about in the series, maybe you haven't heard that if you're just listening to the podcast, but we are going to do a breakdown of the soundtrack itself at some point for the channel as well. And not as a podcast, but just as a video for the channel. So we'll go into kind of individual songs and the like then. But what stood out to you as far as the overall quality of the soundtrack? And then you can talk about a couple of songs you really liked, certainly here.
Overall, I thought the soundtrack was fine. I think there were definitely a couple of knockouts. Absolutely. Like, there were some songs that were maybe the best in the whole series. But overall, it was fine. There were not very many town themes that I particularly liked or gravitated to, unlike in maybe some of the older games where I like a bunch of the town themes, or maybe some of the other tracks like Into the Abyss.
Yeah.
Is that what it's called?
Yeah, the old schoolhouse theme.
The old schoolhouse theme. There were a few, but overall, it was, I don't know, it was fine. I probably prefer some of the, like, overall, I think I maybe like the soundtrack for 2 more, like start to finish. But 3 had some knockout songs for sure. But
So I am in almost the same boat. And it's weird to me because I think as a whole, just top to bottom, I probably like 3's soundtrack more than any other one in the series. And that's despite the fact that I don't think I have anywhere near as many favorite tracks from 3 as I do from 1 and especially 2.
yeah.
Now 2 is tricky because 2 includes plenty of themes from 1 as well.
Mm-hmm.
So like, do I count Legram's theme as one of my favorite from 2? It doesn't really count for 2.
That's true. Yeah.
But
I
it
forgot about
exists in 2,
Mhm.
and I get to hear it for a part of the game. 3's town themes in particular felt weak to me.
Yeah, they're just kind of like blah. I don't really remember them. I certainly don't listen to them outside of the game like I do with Legram or Ruhr or Heimdall. Like, none of
And
them really stood out.
I don't like 3's town themes as much as I do at least Sky 1 and 2. Sky 1 has several town themes. It's one of the first things that caught my attention about the series was going through there and being like, wow, like the battle theme's weird and quirky and fun, and I guess that's okay, but I actually just like walking through a town and getting to a new place and being like, oh, cool, check
I feel
this
like
theme
I
out.
vaguely remember the town. I don't remember an exact town specifically, but I do remember like wandering around the town and being like, this is nice music as I'm wandering around lost and can't find anything. At least there's good music. Yeah.
In fact, I think 3's greatest strength, besides some of its tippy top, which you mentioned, like Spiral of Erebos, quickly in consideration for one of the best songs in the series.
Yep.
One Way to the Netherworld.
Yep, that
Quickly in
one's really
consideration for one of the best songs in the series. So up the tippy top is very good.
Yes.
But I actually think 3's biggest strength is its route themes. I think all the stuff that you hear when you're out on various paths and walkways and mines and underground areas and dungeons. Now, I'm not even cheating and including the fact that both of those 2 themes we mentioned are technically in that same category. I just mean the stuff when you're out like walking along a beach or, you know, a cobblestone path between 2 cities. The Trail series has always been good about those as well, but I thought 3's were all pretty solid.
Yeah, there's one in particular I can think of that I really liked. I have yet to download it, but I did like it a lot. So
I do have the whole soundtrack now. I can listen to it without worrying about potential spoilers. So
true. Hey, we can do that now.
Yeah.
Exciting.
So it's a tricky spot for me because it's kind of like, what do you value more? Do you value something that's like a B+ across the board with a couple of standouts but really no flawed songs? Or do you want something that has extreme highs but like, as much as I love maybe a dozen different songs from 2, because it's definitely the game with the most songs on my playlist,
Mm-hmm.
I'll also recognize that there's like 24 tracks in that game that I barely remember.
It's
that
true.
made no impact on me.
Mm-hmm.
That I'm like, okay, this is fine for this moment of the game, but I don't really care.
That is true.
So I almost think it's kind of tough. I would probably put 2 slightly ahead of 3, but again, it's sort of what's, if you agree with my assessment of it, at that point, it's just kind of like preference more than anything else.
Plus 2 has the opera song. Wait, yes, it introduced it, right? Or was that 1? Oh God,
one doesn't have the opera version of that. That's just the theme for Lohengrin Castle.
Yeah, you're right.
2 introduces the opera version. It's from one of the super arranges, but
that's right.
It's the first game you hear it in.
Yes, so therefore, it gets bumped up just a little bit.
And also, it's tricky because, like Cold Steel 1 and 2 as well, there are also a handful of themes from past games mixed in, like the Courageous theme in 2, for example. One of the 2 themes is from Sky 3. So it's like, it's super awesome the way it's used there, but it's like, that doesn't really count either. So like, we finally got to experience Unfathomed Force in a game that we could play in the States for the first time. It's a song I had heard quite a bit because I discovered it on accident and loved it. So it showed up in 3, and that was great. Like, when that first part hit, I was like, oh shit, like, awesome, here we go. But it doesn't really count, at least as far as assessing 3's soundtrack.
Yeah.
It counts towards my enjoyment of the game, for sure.
There's a cool moment.
Yeah. But until we wrecked that fight.
Until we just completely broke it.
I mean, it was embarrassing.
Not a good showing for, I can't pronounce her name. I always want to say it wrong, and I don't know why. Aryan Road.
There you go.
There we go. I did it.
The only thing that gives me comfort is knowing who was there for that fight and recognizing the fact that, especially learning more about Gaius later, which we'll talk about in a bit, that we're pretty stocked for bear in that fight. So it's not like we're going in there and we wreck them with, like Elliot and Musei, and that's to say, it's not to say I think they're weak, but you know what I mean? Like, it has more clout when like Aurelia is fighting alongside us, and it's not Elliot throwing bubbles at them.
That's true.
So
now
I
that would have been
better.
hilarious, but also, yeah.
So, let's switch gears then, and we're going to do characters. We have to be careful about this because if we're going to talk about each character,
so many characters. We'll be here all night. We fell into this trap in the Persona review. It's part of why it ended up being 3 hours. So what I think we're going to do is I'm going to pull up a list of the major characters. Okay.
As far as the class 7s.
Okay. That's fair. We don't need to talk about like the side characters.
I think while I'm looking this up, you should speak on just anybody else who stood out to you among the crew that's not in that group, because there's plenty of other characters in the mix here, on the good side and the bad side. But considering we're going to specifically talk about the people that are near and dear to our hearts, who else kind of stuck out as far as the side characters?
Oh gosh. Oof, that's a toughie.
Nobody stood out.
Nobody. I mean, in all seriousness, it's not that I don't care, but I just like the main crew so much. I don't know if they're... I mean, Aurelia... Well, does Aurelia count? Would she be... She's not like a class 7 person.
So yeah, this is the spot to talk about her, yes.
Okay. She was cool. Randy. I wanted more of Randy.
We have the crossbow games for that. Hopefully,
I mean, I guess
someday.
there are other crossbow games. And, 4, maybe he'll actually do something. But, yeah, I liked him. He was cool. Especially first time getting to meet this character since we don't have the crossbow games. I don't know if there's anybody else. Oh, Agate. I like Agate. Agate was always cool in Sky. I liked seeing him return. I could do without the shipping, but I know that's just me. I liked everyone's involvement in this game. I think they brought in characters who would contribute in a meaningful way, and I think it was smart.
Yeah, this is going to be brought up maybe in our wish list at the very end, but I'll just bring it up now because it makes sense. I think, in retrospect, they did a good job of who they offered to us as party members here. Mm-hmm. Agate and Tita and Tio, and they kept anybody else major away because they're all probably coming in 4. Like, there's no Estelle and Joshua here. I assume they're in 4.
I have to think they're going to be at this point, especially with the way it ended. Like,
yeah, they have to be coming.
Yeah.
And as such... I think the same thing is true, although we got a taste of it with like Lloyd and company. Some of the main Crossbell folks also are probably going to be present at some point or another in 4.
Yeah.
So it makes sense not to have them here as you're building up to this thing if you're going to rely on them heavily in the next one. And looking back at that and assuming that's the case for 4, I like the assortment that we got. It felt like we had just enough guest characters that we could mix them in and yet they weren't like crowding what was already going to be a complicated and large field with how many other old members were mixed in, especially towards the end.
Yeah.
And then juggling the 6 new folks, counting Reen.
Right.
It was a balancing act, but I felt like we really had enough time to give everybody a little bit of shine.
I actually think they did really well with the balancing act. I think it could have become a mess very quickly, and they managed to not do that really at any point. It felt like you had a good amount of time with everybody, and everybody was swapped out pretty regularly, so it's not like you were stuck with anybody too long either. The variety was really nice, and I was not expecting that going into 3. I thought, okay, here are new kids and us, and that's it. And we're going to like barely see the old Class 7 or any of these other side characters. And we actually got a lot more of them than I thought. So I was very happy about that.
Yeah. So I think that'll be interesting as we go into 4. We'll talk more about that towards the end here. But I don't know, standout-wise, I have to admit, Major Michael kind of grew on me.
Oh, yeah.
Even though he's sort of just a stick in the mud for most of the game. That's obviously by design. And somebody has to be the person keeping the inmates in the asylum. Since the principal's not going to be the one.
No. She's the one letting them out of the asylum.
Yeah, she just opens the doors and she's like, whatever.
Bye.
This should be fun. And you're like, Getting to know Aurelia more was a lot of fun. You mentioned her already.
That was a pleasant surprise because we didn't really get to know her much in 2. She was like really a villain in 2.
I enjoyed Toa's role. I think she sort of comes into her own in this game.
That was nice. Also, her voice acting is a thing we could... The voice acting is really, really good for everyone across the board, and including her. She's so much better.
All the main characters are better.
Yes.
Like, the VO work continues to get stronger and stronger. There's a few, like, meaningless one-line NPCs that are garbage, but at a certain point, if they say one thing, whatever, like...
Yeah.
There's
We're not going to remember them. Or will we?
I'm looking at you, kid who sounded like shit.
Kai. Actually, I don't know if he was the one who sounded like shit, but there were definitely kids who did. 100%.
I am going to go in a weird order here.
Okay, I like it.
To prevent some people from being earlier.
Okay.
So, character-wise, I'm not even going to talk. We're not even going to do reading this section. We'll leave reading for story.
Yeah.
Una Crawford. This is where you give like 20-second impressions. We're going to just go down the line.
Okay.
Yep. Be ready for the rapid fire.
Yes. Okay. She was a bit of a spaz. She was definitely like the character designed to, like, if there was a newcomer playing the game for whatever reason, she was there to like, I'm like your stand-in or whatever. So she didn't know what was going on, but it was nice to have a new character with an outside perspective looking in on everything going on in this country and how horrible it is. So that was appreciated, and she's fun and she's cool, and I like her connection with the SSS.
Yep.
Yeah, that was cool and unexpected. So I like it.
Yeah, I think it's almost a little bit too off in the beginning where she's like, I have no idea what's going on. I started to feel that line wearing on me just a smidge. But you're right, she does serve as a good vehicle for, like, you know, anybody who happened to just jump into this, which I'm sure is possible. And maybe you missed the earlier games, and this does represent a point where you could jump in. I'm sure you're going to miss a ton of references and background.
So many.
But you could. And so she gets to be the person who's kind of like, wait, I'm not from around here. What in the world is this? What are you talking about? We had like a red castle a year and a half ago. I wasn't here for that. So it works well. I liked her overall. I thought she grew on me, especially when you start to realize that, like, she's a spaz, but she almost always means it in a good way. Like, it's never misdirected. It's never really annoying. It's just kind of like, you silly. You don't understand things. But by the end, I mean, that's all gone, and she just ends up being one of the most caring members of the party.
Yeah.
Curt.
I like him. I'm hoping he gets more of an arc in 4, I guess, at this point. Like, he kind of had one going in with the prince and that whole dynamic, and then it kind of just fell off the train. But I still like him as a character. I do want more from him, I think. But
it feels like in some ways he almost had less to do towards the end.
It really did. It's like he was just there as a bystander to us occasionally, say something to the prince, and that was it.
Now, some of that was necessary as the 2 latecomers started to pick up their prominence and reveal their hand and why they were there. So that was partly by nature. But honestly, it seemed like towards the beginning of the game, he was kind of like the calm voice of reason in a sea of weirdos, including Una and Altina and some other folks.
Yeah.
And when the party started to become a little less spasmodic, that voice was less necessary. Now, I don't think that's a bad thing, and I still like Curt as a character overall, but I'm with you. I think he needs to have a big 4. And
Yeah.
considering what one of his family members is probably going to be doing in a lot of the events at the end of 3, you can see one avenue where that might be possible.
Yeah.
maybe the Vanders will team up and go on a revenge tour.
Dude, that would be amazing.
I would like that. Just kill indiscriminately. I don't even care.
Yep.
It's a little early for this, but the hell with it. We'll just do it in this order. Altina.
Oh, Altina. She is the best member of the new Class 7, by far. She has the best arc. She has the best growth. Especially, I mean, probably mostly because of her a role in 2, and you see how far she comes in 3. Like, it's huge. I was not expecting her to be this nearly involved or emotional, and it was great. I really liked it.
It seems like she's relatively forgettable in 2. She has a couple cool moments and stuff, don't get me wrong.
Oh, yeah.
But she just seems like one of those other characters. She shows up a few times, and towards the end, she has more prominence, but you're like, okay, well.
She has a cool theme song, too, but that was, like, about it.
Yeah. And it's an interesting fight there at the villa.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, it's like, okay, well, she was sort of a half nemesis, and we stopped her.
Right. And then, we team up in the epilogue, which is cool.
Kind of weird. It sets up this nicely.
Yeah. But then it just goes even further, and I was not expecting it. And it was really nice.
But helping her discover a part of her humanity she didn't know she had ended up being even better than I thought it would. Like, early on, you could see the seeds being planted for that.
Yeah.
But paid even more dividends than I expected.
Yeah, like, it's one of those things where like, at the beginning, you're like, well, of course, she doesn't understand yet, and that's the whole point of the game. But, like, the way they execute it is really good. And you're not thinking, like, oh, this is, they planted the seed earlier, and now it's coming through at the end of the game, like, yay. I don't know, it just feels very natural and fluid. It's nice.
We'll talk about the ending later, but I think we've opened an avenue for her to have even more growth going forward. Mm-hmm. Muse.
She's amusing, but I want to know more of what her deal is. I'm sure that'll happen in 4, but it felt like her arc was very much incomplete. So we're going to hint at some things. We don't actually really know what it means or why she's even there. Because, like, even at the end, I want to see it with my own eyes. Well, what does that mean? Why are you here? Like, I don't know. What is your motive? And we didn't get anything. Why is she so obsessed with Reen? Still don't know. I guess lust at this point. I really thought there was going to be an ulterior motive, and clearly there was not.
There will be. She had a couple different wink nudge moments with a few different important characters that are going to pay off in 4.
I guess so. So, I mean, she's fine.
But it is still sort of an incomplete grade. Yeah. I mean, we actually know more than even, like, the main characters of the game do. Like, Reen doesn't know that she's a noble.
Exactly. Stuff like that.
That she's actually the leader of one of the 4 great houses now. He has no idea about that.
Right.
I don't know why they didn't tell everybody. Again, there could be reasons for it. We'll see.
Yeah.
So we kind of know that already there's more going on under the surface, which I think was smart, because if it was only the stuff on the surface, it would have been like...
It would have been obnoxious.
But because we know there's a whole lot going on, and she's playing 4D chess when everybody else is playing checkers, I was pretty much just amused by her the whole time. I think it's a fun dynamic because there are so many straight-laced characters. Like, Yuna's a bit of a ditz at times, but, like, her heart's always in it and she's always trying her best. And Curt is straight-laced as they come. So until you... And Altina is developing emotion, but in the beginning of the game, she's... boring's harsh, but you know what I mean. She's kind of a blank slate of sorts.
Yeah.
So the introduction of Muse and Ash really helps liven that up in a way that I think was very necessary at that part of the game.
That's true. And she is unique. She's unlike any other member of old or new Class 7 that we've ever seen. And that is appreciated. She has a very unique personality. I'd like to see it pay off more.
Yeah. I think anybody who's willing to kick up shit at this point is amusing to me, because there's so many other characters that are entrenched that seeing somebody who's willing to disrupt that dynamic is fun and interesting to me. Because it wasn't even just Reen. It was primarily Reen, obviously. She spent most of the game flirting with him, but sometimes other characters would get into it and she would egg them on, or like a weird thing would be happening and she'd be like, yeah, do it. And she's an agent of chaos, and I appreciate that.
Yes.
Ash, another one that's going to be difficult to grade on its own merits in 3, but I think we still have to give it the score we can for now.
Yeah. I was surprised by where his arc went. I wish there was a little more hinting at it, because I feel like we got a hint at the beginning, which was like 70 hours ago. And then it never came back again until the end. And I was like, what?
Yeah, I mean, even the hint that we got, which certainly teased the potential for something along the lines of what happened, didn't really cement the idea that he was on this path towards it.
Right, and that's kind of the problem. Is like I wasn't like it didn't plant a seed in a way that I thought, oh, this is the trajectory that we're going for. Like I had a completely different thought of what was happening, and then obviously it was proven wrong.
We basically jumped from A to M for murder without too many of the letters in between.
Pretty much, yeah. It was very sudden, very jarring.
Now we did get some fun development for him as far as his character. Seeing about how he was working with Lecter and learning more about his family and his upbringing and going through his house and having him open up that way, all of that was good. And seeing him come more out of his shell was because it's like the reverse of Curt, which I thought was a fun back and forth between them. Like Curt loosens a little bit and Ash stops being quite so obnoxious, so that works out well.
Yeah.
But I do wish, and this is going to speak to my score of the game as a whole, that there had been a little bit more to connect the dots along the way.
Yep.
And it hadn't just been a huge twist reveal without much to pay it off for.
That is the biggest problem in general.
We'll
get there. We'll get there.
Elisa, we're going to old class 7.
Elisa. Oh, okay. Wow. I do like her a lot more in this game. Some stuff happens to her. We'll get there.
Yeah, another one that's going to be hard to completely grade right now. But
yeah, I appreciate that she's matured a lot. She's not nearly. I mean, I remember I borderline hated her in the first game. She was so annoying, so petty, and she's really not like that at all anymore. And that was nice. I mean, and the same could be said for pretty much all of the old class 7 is they've all matured, and that's a trend that's continued. Very noticeable with her. Very appreciated with her.
I have never been quite as harsh about Elisa as you have, but even so, I recognize that she's come a long way, maybe more than almost anyone in Old Class 7, which is good because she did need it. I think the first game, because she's sort of positioned as the love interest, whether you like it or not, it doesn't really do her any favors. If you do like it, then that's great. That's there for you. But if you don't,
right.
I mean, to me, there's a handful of characters I see that usually get the most flack, and she's up there. Machias is way up there because, I mean, anybody who played the first game knows it's a rough start for him.
It is very rough.
Eustace has a little bit of that, although he's come a long way himself.
Oh boy!
I occasionally see Laura and Fee don't have fans because they're kind of dry. Everybody has their favorites, and that's fine. We're not going to try and sway people. I'm a huge Laura fan, as is known. Not everybody loves her. That's fine. Elisa, you can tell, has clear supporters and detractors in a way that most of the characters don't.
Yep.
But at this point, I feel like it's hard to dislike her.
Yeah.
You don't have to love her. That's fine.
I mean,
but she's come a really long way.
She really has. And the fact that this game has made me actually like her now, legitimately like her as a character when I didn't care before, that's a pretty big deal.
We're going to get to the rest of this list, but is there anybody you don't care about in either Class 7? Not me.
No, I actually think I do care about everyone, even if some of the caring is higher than others. There's still a level of care that I didn't have before. And
that's pretty rare, because generally in an RPG party, there's going to be at least one or two characters who I'm whatever. I don't use you. I don't like you. I don't maybe hate you, but I'm whatever. I'm not going to put you on my team. Go stand on the sidelines.
Yeah.
And here, I mean, there's a couple people that I'm definitely not going to put on my team over others. But for the most part, I don't resent having to use somebody else who shows up. I'm always okay, cool, you're along for the ride. Let's go.
Yeah.
And considering how big the cast of potential party members is, I think that's impressive. That deserves commendation for the Trail series as a whole. Because that extends to the people who are not regulars in this game, but from other series. Almost all of them show up, and I'm cool, yeah, come join us. Let's go fight stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Elliot.
Oh, my win, bro.
He has not a ton to do in this game.
He doesn't have a lot to do, actually. I was going to say he really doesn't grow at all, but I still really like him. His voice actor is really good. And he's matured in the sense that he's not nearly as scared anymore, which is nice. It's a little nice character detail, but yeah, he doesn't really do anything.
And it's awesome that he's getting to realize his dream, and he's become kind of a big deal as he's touring the country, and all that's well and good. And you can argue by proxy with his dad, and I guess to a lesser extent his sister, who's not really seen per se, but is referenced.
She's not in this game at all. We don't see her.
She's just regarded in regards to Nightheart.
Right. Yeah.
But
Forgot about that.
But I mean. He doesn't need to do as much growing because he didn't start off at a position like a Machias or an Elisa did. I would have liked him to do a little bit more,
It would have been nice.
but I'm okay with it overall.
Yeah.
In a game with this many characters, there's going to be some people who don't have as much time to shine. That's inevitable.
Yep. And for some characters, it's fine. You let it slide. For other characters, it's not so fine.
Because he's touring, he sort of has an excuse to not have done much else because he's been busy doing that and expanding his musical prowess. And okay.
Yep.
Don't hate it. Don't love it.
Do you, buddy?
Laura.
Laura is really
She's my wife.
waifu for lifeu. She's cool. I like that she's traveling around as basically Radiant Blade Master 2.0. And she's going around to the different schools and with the styles. And I like that her family lineage has come full circle. They were able to actually address that because they've been hinting at that for forever now.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't really grow that much per se, but she's always been really cool and she's always been really level-headed, so it was nice to just see more of that.
Yeah, if nothing else, she's just kind of expanding her range. Her primary focus is still swordsmanship. I don't think that's ever going to change. That's sort of principle to who she is.
Yeah.
But I was happy when she showed up. I obviously used her whenever possible, and she does get to mix it up with some interesting folks in this.
Yeah, she does.
And
if nothing else, that's like the coolest part is that she gets to duke it out with some people
and hold her own.
Mm-hmm. When she would not have been able to before. So she's definitely grown a lot in terms of like her physical strength. So
now I made a crazy prediction early in this game that has not come to fruition yet and is not looking very good.
I forgot about that
because we are running out of available robots.
We have one left.
There's only really one left unless another one becomes available for some reason or another.
Right.
But I'm still thinking. I'll there's one more game to go. I might as well live on the prediction hill until I die on it. So yeah, she's gonna be an awakener. I'm gonna stick by that.
Okay.
I don't know if she's. I almost feel like there has to be one more from our core group of people, but
we literally only have one, and they have 6. Wait, is that math? 6. Yeah, 1.
7 minus 1 is
6.
Yes.
Yeah, they have 6, and you're just like, Christ! Literally, all of you banded together.
Well,
All of you
one of
who
them doesn't
happen to
really
have.
count, but yeah.
Well, yeah, it's a little.
Even so, it's
a little
not.
weird.
The odds are stacked against them for sure. It feels like we
the
need
chances
something.
of that happening.
Now, there's
but,
another
like, that's
individual
not
who also is
statistically
primed to
possible.
maybe fly back to the other side, but even so,
Also
we're at a
true,
disadvantage.
But
so.
we're still hugely disadvantaged.
All right, talk about Eustace.
My boy, he's grown up so much, and oh my God, this game is not nice to him in terms of his family and.
I mean, you can argue that none of them have been.
All the games have been really mean to him and his family.
Like his
It's
dad's an
true.
asshole to him in 1.
Dad's an asshole.
His brother's an asshole to him in 2.
Yep. And then,
Everyone's an asshole to him in 3.
Yeah, the trend continues. He's having a hard time, but he's still my favorite. He's definitely come a long way from 1, and that's really nice. And it was just nice to see that upward trend continue in this game. He's keeping it together. He's running his own house, doing his best.
He is growing on me as a character. He is rising up my list.
Oh my
If
God,
he could suck
yay!
less in combat,
I
it
know,
would be the missing
he
piece.
really does suck in combat. I don't know why they didn't give him another craft. I don't get it.
It's a mystery to me. You gave him 2 medium circles.
You give him 2
and Platinum
medium
Shield,
circles
which is
and
great.
Platinum Shield, which is really good, but then he has 2 medium circles to work with.
Now, he's meant to be a spellcaster primarily.
And
still,
that's
but
how I use him in 2 as well.
He was always kind of a hybrid, though.
But
Like, he
he's
was
always
meant to be kind of physical attacks, kind of magic. He could go either way,
Right.
and his skill set matched that. And in this game, it feels like it's a game where he can be set up as a good caster in a game where you don't really want to use casters.
That's also something I noticed about this game is like in previous games there was a lot of spell casting, and in this game like we didn't do it at all because it's not really built for that. And so if you have spellcasters, they're kind of it's like, well, they'll take 20 turns to cast and we'll see if there are any enemies alive by the time they do. So
It just gives too much time to be interrupted when you can do a craft instantly. And if you're really following a break strategy, which is the way to go in this game if you're being smart, it doesn't really incentivize spellcasting that much. Now,
It
I'm
really
sure if you
doesn't.
loaded up a spellcaster with a heavy break damage stuff, that it would be effective
it could
as
be
well.
viable, yeah.
But that wasn't really how I went, unfortunately. It was just Emma, and that was about it.
Right. So yeah, he definitely got the short end of the stick in terms of combat, but
Maybe
As
my
a
least
character-
favorite character in combat.
yeah, which is a shame. 'cause
And that
I think
includes Machias.
That's really sad. But it also, like, the game didn't do him any favors. 2 freaking medium circles. I don't understand.
I am baffled, truly.
It's really dumb.
Speaking of Machias,
He's fine. He didn't really do much. He's not nearly as involved in some of the other characters. He was just kind of there sometimes. He's like an inspector or something. I guess that's cool. I don't know.
I like that he's forging his own path and kind of coming to his own worldview over time. And it makes sense for him to do kind of a book smart, well-read, by the book type of job.
He also doesn't hate nobles anymore, at least not so vocally, so that's nice.
Yeah.
I could do without that. I mean, that has definitely helped. He's chilled out a lot, so that's appreciated.
And at this point, it also makes more sense because the people running the 4 great houses are actually all pretty good.
We got, well, Patrick's not actually running it, but his dad is fine.
Seems solid.
Ragnar has chilled out.
Yeah, he's probably the worst of the 4, but we didn't really see much of him in 3.
We really didn't. And then Eustace is doing work, and
we'll see what Muse does.
Yeah.
But she's a vast improvement over the asshole that preceded her, so...
That's true.
So there's less reason to hate the direction the nobility is taking the country, partly because the nobility doesn't really have control of the direction of the country
really
anymore.
They don't have that much power anymore, too.
They've sort of been removed from that equation by design.
Yes.
So that also could be part of Machias's change of pace, but I think it's also just his relationship with Eustace and, just coming to terms with the fact that everybody's an individual. Some nobles are good. Not all of them are assholes. Some commoners are bad. Not all of them are great.
Exactly.
Fee.
Kind of in the same boat as Machias. Like, I liked her fine. She's got some stuff with all of her dads, which is unfortunate.
Many dads.
But she wasn't around too much, actually, because we didn't even get to use her in the beginning, when she was around. We didn't actually get to keep her in the party. She's cool. I like that she's doing work as a bracer with Sarah. It makes sense. I think it's a good trajectory considering her start as a Jaeger and that whole thing with Sarah. And the fact that they're actually teaming up now is nice. I liked it.
I like her hair.
Her hair is very cool. I do like it that it's longer. I think it's a better hairstyle.
She, more than anybody except maybe Altina, has really come into her own personality as well. Because it's sort of shocking to go back and look at the first game and see, like, she barely spoke. She didn't really emote much. Like, she, more than anybody, especially when you consider all 3 games compared to just Altina in this one, has really opened up over time, and I'm sure that's Class 7's influence.
Now,
yeah,
actually.
if there is somebody who's willing to mess with shit in the first party, like the old Class 7, it's her. And it's not close.
That's true. That is correct.
I guess Milliam is in that conversation, and that's sort of just because she's happy-go-lucky, so by design she's kind of like messes with people whether she means to or not. But I think to me now, Fee is the one that eggs people on, and like elbows them in the ribs a little bit. So, and I appreciate that because again, I like people that mess with the status quo. Emma,
oh my goodness, she's grown so much. I like that she's a lot more involved in like the story and actually telling us things for the most part. She's become really powerful as a witch, and her whole dynamic with Vita is really interesting now, and her grandmother. I like that she doesn't put up with her shit anymore. It's very nice. She's definitely become stronger in her personality. So I liked it. I liked that she was kind of running around trying to figure stuff out with the spirit veins. It felt like she was doing something important. So
we got to see almost more of her than almost anybody in the old Class 7.
Really, we did spend a lot of time with her.
Which I don't mind as somebody who had her as the backup when we did your playthrough.
That's true. She is my backup consistently.
Yeah. So like I like Emma quite a bit, and continuing her trajectory from 2. I mean, she's just. It's not her fault that she's sort of held at arm's length in 1 because of the reveals that have to happen. But even so.
But 2 and 3 definitely they well make up for that.
Yeah. She's a rock star.
Yeah, she's great.
3 more to go. Gaius.
Oh, Gaius. I'm sad that a lot of his stuff didn't come into play until like the very end. But I liked his involvement. I thought his intro with the Stahlritter and the Aryan Road at the Brionia Island?
The military base.
Yeah, that place. Very cool. I like what he has done with his time. It's just sad that it didn't happen maybe just a little sooner. It was very late.
I don't necessarily mind it because they did pay it off. I was actually going to be a little bit frustrated if they continued to tease it this much and then it didn't happen until 4.
And That's true. I thought it was going to be like another Emma situation where we don't get really a lot of her stuff until 2. I thought the same thing was going to happen here with Gaius, which would have sucked, but
he's weird to me because he's sort of the counterexample to the one problem that we have. I think that the core of our issues with this game, which are still not like going to detract from it being something we enjoyed, but he continuously hints to like, yeah, I was gone for a while, but it was necessary. I'm sorry you couldn't get a hold of me. I'll tell you about it when I get the chance. Like, it's not the right time right now. But there's like 4 different occasions where he talks about that, and you're like, oh, cool, like something's going on there.
Yeah.
And then it pays off, and you're like, oh, so that's the thing he was talking about this whole time.
Yeah.
Great.
Good.
But
especially when they hint at it so many times.
For the most part, he's an outlier. And I don't know that
That's
I want
true.
every single one to be like that. I'm not saying that. It doesn't have to be so overt. But it's a stark contrast to some other things that happen where there's no build to them at all, and they're just dumped on your lap.
Yeah, they're just like, here's the story. And we're like, what?
It happened, and you're like, what?
Okay.
Milliam.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, our last 2 are complicated.
Can you go first? I don't know what to say.
I have never been the biggest Milliam fan, so this is tricky for me, but I think pairing her with Eustace more often has brought out a better side of her as well, because he's the perfect foil for someone with a ball of energy and exuberance like her. I like that she sort of is off on her own, doing her own thing for most of this game, because she's pretty strong and can handle herself, and it's unclear exactly what she's doing for some of the game because of her allegiance with the Iron Bloods, but I liked her overall.
Definitely less spazzy.
About the right amount, because you can't take it away from her.
Well,
she can't just be.
She can't be like less.
Yeah, that
but
would be
definitely like it's toned back just a little bit. It's still there, but it's not like completely bonkers. And I do think that interaction with Eustace does help. I actually do like them as a duo in this game, which I did not used to like them as a duo. So the fact that
they were building to this the whole time.
I actually like their interactions in this game is definitely nice. I don't know if I ship it per se, but I can see why people ship it now. I get it, which I didn't used to. So that's an improvement. Yeah, she was entertainingly spastic.
I wouldn't say that she's a cut above the rest, but if you do like her as a character, it won't wound me. That's all I'm going to say about that.
Yeah.
Crow.
Oh. Yeah, I guess he is.
Last one.
He is a person, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, God.
Another one I think, I'll buy you time again. Another one that I think does a good job of being interspersed enough to where you're curious to learn more, and the eventual payoff feels like it's more earned. Because he kind of shows up on a few different occasions throughout, and there's little hints here and there, or a fight here and there, where you're like, okay, like we're progressing. I still don't know what in the world's happening here, but like I'm building to something. So this is great. I have no problem with that.
Yeah. Agreed. You're right. I mean, it did pay off in a way that I was not expecting, but it was nice to see that it did, because I wasn't sure that it was going to really. So
yeah, that was another one that seemed like it could have been pushed to 4.
Yeah, and I'm really glad they didn't do that.
And it still kind of is. We don't know what the end really means specifically yet.
Yeah, but it was good. I mean, I think his presence definitely has an impact on everyone, which is nice. It's nice to see that we don't just like forget about the past, like in some games where they're just like, the past happened or something. Like here, we're still kind of reeling from that loss and trying to come to terms with what's happening. Also, that fight with Blue Destination, it might be my favorite moment in this game. Just Blue Destination all the time. Just
if only he weren't dashing in with guns for an immediate close encounter conflict.
Right.
With a sword.
Yes.
If he had his twin blade.
If he had the twin blades, that would have been
maybe
perfect,
he'll go back to that now that he's back to his old self, and that was the thing that was
maybe.
a signature of Siegfried. I don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know yet. We'll see.
I guess we'll see.
It feels like he's owed a big redemption arc in 4.
I am looking forward to a potential redemption arc now, seeing what has happened at the end of 3. I'm really hoping for that, because I think he has a lot of potential, especially when you take into account 1 and 2.
I think that's also true, and like there has to be some redemption from somewhere in that quadrant of people, right?
Right? There has to be somebody.
Toa's been great the whole time.
Right.
Yes, you sort of can't help but feel sorry for her at this point, because like everything is falling apart around her. So like she's been great, but like the other three are all just mixed up in all sorts of weird stuff right now to where
It's chaos right now.
Mhm.
So even if he is redeemed, that would be great.
So somebody from the test version of Class 7 has to be a pioneer of good going forward, right?
Right? Otherwise, we're all doomed.
I don't know.
So,
To have him die the way he does in 2, it feels like he's owed something.
yeah. And yeah, it was so poetic in 2 as well. Like, he thought he died achieving his dream. And then 2 seconds later, the person he thought he killed shows up.
Yep.
And you're like, well, that's tragic.
At least it didn't happen while he was alive.
That would have been worse.
That would have really rubbed it in the wound.
Yes, it would.
Perhaps literally. It would have been like stuck his fist in there and been like, you've been dead for no reason. Right in the wound. That would have been really dark.
That would have been, oh my.
Speaking of really dark, having talked about just a handful of the characters, but you can see why we had to limit it to that because we're already at the hour mark with about 10 minutes to go maybe. There's plenty of other things we could say about the characters, but we could talk about this game for like 5 hours, so we had to limit it to something.
Yes.
Let's talk about story.
It was slow and not in the same way as like the first game. Like I don't know if it works as well as 1, even though it's trying to emulate 1 with the formula. The idyllic school life, I think, distracts from a lot of where the story is going. And there are some cool moments in there, but so many of the plot twists happening at the very end, like that was very jarring.
Yeah, the pacing is my biggest problem with this game.
Yep.
And it feels like it is too backloaded. That's not to say that the moments, particularly at the end of each chapter, don't have meaning and importance and aren't really fun to go through.
Right.
But there's only 4 chapters.
Right.
Which means there's only 4 points at which you finally build to this crescendo. And again, you can't just be full throttle 100% all the time because then nothing has meaning. If everything is just bonkers crazy, there's twists happening all the time, at a certain point you just start to tune it out because you're like, well, okay, but what's normal anymore?
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that I think that there's not issues with the first 3/4 of this game. And issues, again, is not meant to be something negative. I don't want to have fans of the series being like, come on, man, it's being too harsh. Like, this is going to be a score that's at least an 8 for me out of 10. And a game that I enjoyed quite a bit overall. And I'm willing to go through some of the slower parts because I enjoyed this series and these games as much as I do.
Yeah.
It's just kind of weird. Because setting aside just the pacing issues, the biggest problem is like all this stuff happens at the end of 2. And there's a few other things that happen in between 2 and the start of 3 that were just sort of pushing away to the periphery.
That is true.
The entire time that Reen's a teacher. And him being an instructor at the new school is, I think, a cool decision. And that new dynamic with his students and him in that position is a really good fit for him. So I don't even have qualms with the basis of it.
Right.
But the whole game, you're like, okay, but what about your dad?
Right. And like literally we went through the whole game and didn't address it until like the last, 3 or 4 hours?
Yeah, 6, 7 maybe when you go back all the way back to like when he first appears again. But like at the start of that mission or whatever.
Fair.
It's quibbling. Like
6 hours in a 130 whatever hour. How long did we spend on this game?
110-ish.
10? Yeah, 110 hours.
I think I didn't go back and look at the final count, but we were at like 103 before we recorded over the weekend, so 107, 108 was probably the final tally.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
With some fluff in there too from various recording things and just leaving it on one, so it's probably about 100 on the dot. Is my guess.
Right. Yeah.
You can't have them just come to loggerheads in the beginning of the game. I understand you have to build to it, and it's fine to put it towards the end. It just feels like there's this elephant in the room the whole time, where it's like, what happened
right.
to resolve the events at the end of 2? And the answer is, we'll tell you later.
Yeah, shrug. We'll get to it.
And I just don't think that was handled as well as it should have been. And I think the problem is I would have been a lot more lenient with the school side of things, the return to the pacing of 1 that you mentioned, how it's kind of like, these set activities at certain times and you go on a field study and major stuff happens and you come back and do it again. I liked going back to that rhythm overall. I needed a few more kernels along the way that were telling me what was happening in the bigger picture.
Yep.
Because if anything, the end of chapters ended up being more crazy because of the events that were happening in the there and now than they were the tie between them to the end of the game.
Right. And like a lot of those events how do they tie into the end? Like, I'm not even sure, really. And whereas, like, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I almost think if I'm comparing the stories between 1 and 3, 1 might have just like a slightly better story in terms of pacing and payoff, because you have the old schoolhouse, you have the voice in his head and the heart attacks and like all this weird stuff happening throughout. It's like you get a sense that there's something else going on behind this idyllic school life. Plus, I think I can forgive the first game for being paced how it is, because it is the first game.
Yeah.
Now we're in the third game. It's like, I don't know if I can give it the same leeway.
What's the name of the keep? Einhell Keep or whatever
Einhell
it is?
Keep. It has no purpose.
It's
no
a poor
point.
man's old schoolhouse.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
it's
the music
a poor man's
is
old schoolhouse.
The music is good, but it has no payoff to the characters or story at all.
It's just Schmidt torturing you for reasons that have not yet become clear. I know what the motivation is behind them, but what that had to do with anything in the end is not clear, because Schmidt spends the last part of the game being dumbfounded by what's happening around him because his former mentors are all betraying him left and right, which is perfectly understandable for him, but it's like, well, did this exist as anything other than like a dungeon crawl mechanic to get me some levels in between chapters?
That's exactly what it felt like. It felt like a dungeon crawl mechanic, whereas in the first game, there was at least purpose there. Now, a lot of it was not revealed until the end, but at least when you look back, you're like, okay, I see what they were doing here at these moments. I don't feel that with 3. I just think a lot of the stuff with Ouroboros and what they're trying to do and like how they're going about it, how do the experiments tie into this plan? No idea. Don't know.
But they kept coming up at the end of chapters. I
Every
have some
time.
ideas, and I think they make some connections in the game as well, but...
And it could be, we've been playing this for like 8 months, and it's been spread out, and we just don't remember all the details, also, like, geez.
I talked about that in one of the videos, so if you were, if you missed a few parts along the way or something, I do think that some of our criticism in that level is based on the fact that we had to space it out because of the nature of when the videos were airing.
Yeah. This
is a game that would not have taken us until April to beat if we had been playing it straight up. It came out in October.
Right.
So I do think that's part of it, and that's a fair consideration that I'm trying to give the game as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I still can't stop this gnawing feeling that the beginning is just too idyllic.
It really is.
And the end is way too bonkers in comparison, when you could have had a little bit of both. I don't need it to be front-loaded.
Mm-hmm.
I just need it not to all happen in the last 4 hours.
Yes. And I think, I mean, having a bonkers ending is fine, but it doesn't fix everything else that came before it. This doesn't automatically make it like a 10 out of 10 game because I had a bonkers ending. Like, the whole thing needs to be good start to finish. And I know there are people who will like 3 more than 2, and that's fine.
No problem with it. I can see the argument behind it. I have no qualms with it. It's not like a completely flawed opinion in my book where I'm like, you like 1 more than 2, where I'm like, who likes 1 more than 2?
Right. That person doesn't exist. But
and you can even like it more than 2, but I don't think you can say 1's a better game than 2.
Right. And I think for me, 2 is still the better game because it is stronger in terms of its story, start to finish. It's a more cohesive experience. You get more of the like hints throughout the, like, a lot of the seeds that they plant for some of the crazy stuff at the end is paid off because it's planted earlier in the game.
And I get some of the complaints with 2. I understand that at the end of the day, your actions don't have a ton of weight. I mean, you spend a lot of time flying around the courageous and helping people and reuniting former students, and I like that aspect of it.
I like it a lot too, actually, because I mean, your kids. Well, you shouldn't be in the middle of a war anyway. So, anyways, I appreciate the realism.
The defining difference to me is, I enjoy both the first half, because the driving force there is just reuniting Reem with his former classmates that he was so ripped asunder from.
Yeah.
So like, I'm driven just to keep finding party members and add them to the equation. So even though there's not a lot happening in the first half, other than him just going to locations and maybe helping in a little dispute,
I'm super invested.
I'm into it because I want to get him reunited.
Yeah.
And then the mid part is crazy.
Yep.
And one of my favorite parts of the series.
It's still my favorite part in the series. All that stuff on the Pantagruel and the escape is my favorite.
And while you can argue that the second half doesn't have a ton to it until you get the Infernal Castle showing up and things go crazy again, I still just like the feel of it more. And that's going to be difficult and really hard to approach.
Stakes. It feels like there are stakes. Even, I mean, I don't care about the town on fire that much, but I mean, at least it feels like there is. I get what they're going for with the weight of like this civil war and its impact across everyone. I may not have cared personally, but I get what they were going for, and I like the tone. I like the more serious tone generally.
And this is just a structural thing that I don't even know if I would call it a flawed decision, but with 6 chapters instead of 4. you have the ability to build 2 more crescendos in the interim instead of it being...
that 2 had 6 chapters.
So yeah, because like 3 before, 3 after, with the midway point serving as sort of like a...
it's like a intermission or something.
There's a word for it, intermezzo or something. It's not a a prologue or an epilogue. There's another word.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like, that's tough for me to reconcile when I think back on 3.
Yep.
So let's give it a score and then talk briefly about our hopes for the next one. We have like, I'm willing to go 75 minutes. We have like 5 minutes. Score shouldn't be that long. We've already talked about what would lead to it.
I could go a little later.
No, that's fine.
I don't need sleep.
Episodes can only be so big before they become too much of a file size to load to the place we load it to.
I see. Fair enough. Okay. Score. Christ.
Out of 10.
Out of 10. Okay. I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10.
That is lower than I expected. What would you rate the first and the second game?
Okay.
Gun to your head, just to give it a relative scale.
Okay. For the first game, I'd honestly probably give it, I don't know, 7.5, maybe an 8, just because the ending is really good. And again, some of the payoff. Of course, I'm trying to not think about 2 in that equation too. 7.5. 2 is, I'm gonna give 2 a 9. I really like 9. 9. I really like.
I love Cold Steel 9.
Cold Steel 9.
Fuck
God.
4. We're skipping straight to 9.
I really like Cold Steel 2 a lot.
I
it's
thought
up
Grandpa
there
Reen
like...
was a distraction. Sorry, go ahead.
Grandpa Reen. I really like 2 a lot. It's like one of my favorite games ever. I mean, it's up there somewhere on that list. It's just really good. I just like where it goes, and I like that it's a nice contrast from 1 in a way that I wasn't expecting, and it was awesome.
I am sort of the opposite. I would only give the first game like a 6.5, maybe a 7, because I can't attribute all the payoff that it leads to that game itself.
Mm-hmm.
And that game is so paint by numbers for 90% of it that while the huge twist at the end sort of helps with that, it doesn't undo the fact that you spent 70 hours playing a very straight-laced RPG. Now, again,
that's fair.
I enjoy it quite a bit. I love this series, but that first game is very straightforward.
Yeah.
So, like, that's where I'd be for the first game. The second game would be right around a 9 for me, too. I do think it's still not perfect or anything. It has its issues, and not everything necessarily does pay off in the end. A lot of character moments do, but your effect in the overall story feels kind of secondary in a lot of cases until the very end.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough for me because the Trail series has done that as a whole. And in some ways, I actually prefer it. Like Sky in particular, especially 1, is very much like, we're solving this aspect of this big thing, but we're just like 16-year-olds in the world, so we're helping. But at the end of the day, these important people step in and do this thing, because we can't just save the world like most RPGs.
Yeah.
It sort of works against it the longer the games get, like they do in Cold Steel, because then it feels like your moments have less effect. So all that's to say I'm building to 3, where I'm giving it an 8 out of 10. In between the 2, I don't think I can go any higher, because although the ending is very, very solid, and that's the last 15 hours or so in my opinion, basically the moment you step into the 3-path dungeon, I'm pretty much on board with everything through the end completely.
Yeah.
And I think that's all 10 out of 10 material. But its preceding portion, which is another 70 to 80 hours, is too reminiscent of 1 to me to be all that enjoyable again.
Yeah.
And look, they have to make this build overall. I understand. If you just blew everything quickly, you'd have like 10 hours of payoff in like a 20-hour game. I don't want that either. I'm not saying I want to streamline everything. It's just, I don't know, man. I needed more earlier. I really did.
Yep. And honestly, that's my biggest critique as well, because I remember being really excited at the beginning. Like, oh my god, we have this prologue, things clearly get crazy, and I'm excited to see how just quickly things go south. And it was really not quick at all. It was very just plotting. I was like, are we going to get to the plot sometime today?
We do eventually, and it's really good when you do.
It's very interesting. I don't know how I feel about all of those revelations at the end there, but I have barely any time to wrap my head around it, so might need a bit.
In some sense, I would almost prefer if the start of 3 was just jumping in right after the end of 2, and his appointment to this school was an excuse to keep him at arm's length right from the beginning. So you could like, well, the reason he can't talk about what in the world was happening or what his dad is doing or where in the hell this thing is going is because he's being basically banished to this place. He's going to make the most of it. He's going to be the best teacher he can be. but that also would have kind of stunted the other developments across the world, both in the macro and the micro, including like Class 7's continued development, the old Class 7. So I don't know if that would have worked either, but as far as the pacing of it goes, it's weird because 1 jumped directly into 2, 3 is clearly jumping directly into 4, 2 has this gap in between.
Yeah.
And then after that gap, most of the events of which you don't really understand till later in the game anyways, you're then kept at arm's length again for 6 more months before everything finally comes to a head.
Yeah.
And it just felt like it was a little much. Now, to be clear, these are, like a lot of things that we do with RPGs on this channel, complaints about something that we like a lot. So when we talk more about the negatives, it's not like we hated the game or anything. It's just pointing out parts that we didn't love as much, which is what you have to do with things that you like or don't like.
Yeah.
What does this all mean for 4?
I am excited for the potential of more characters from previous games to show up. I really hope we get that. I mean, we already got so many in 3. I think the trend has to continue in 4. I would love to see Joshua and Estelle.
That would be a party of like 30 people.
It would be so bonkers, but I want it anyways.
I guess they can mitigate some of that if like Sharon's not around anymore.
Oh.
Claire's not around anymore.
Right. There are some folks that might not be in the equation, but I'm excited for
Alfin's not around anymore. Maybe I don't know what's going on with her going forward.
Oh boy,
she's had a real rough couple of days.
She's not had a good time at all.
But even so, I mean, just counting the Class 7 people is 16. Because you can't count reading twice.
Right.
So like that's a lot of characters, all of which are potentials, except maybe Milliam.
Yeah. I mean, maybe they could reverse what happened, but I don't know. It seemed pretty.
I hope they don't. That sucks for people who are big fans of her, but like
I kind of hope they don't too.
Something
I want
has to stick.
Something to be, permanent. Please, just one meaningful, not sacrifice, but you know what I mean. Like, make it stick, because there are other fatalities that I don't know are going to stick. So
that would seem like an awfully abrupt thing, and maybe that's by design for the shock value. And again, we almost didn't give it the gravity I think it deserved just because the series has taught us otherwise.
It's continuously done that.
I don't know that I'm rooting for it because I like all 3 of those characters, and Oliver in particular feels like that would be a very strange way for his story to end.
That would be real shit. That I would actually be pissed off if that was permanent. That would be very frustrating because he's been involved in the series really from the start. So that would suck. But
we'll see. I mean, that's one of the things we're looking forward. It's like there's a whole lot to resolve.
Yeah.
From the whole series as a whole. And considering, we talked about this in the videos, even early on as we started to feel the rhythm of 3, that it felt like if 3 was going to mirror 1, then 4 is probably going to be a more insane version of 2. So I'm extremely excited for it. And the way 3 leaves off going into it, I'm super stoked for the fall when that game comes out and looking to finish off this particular arc. Like, I have no qualms with that. 3 is a lead into 4. I'm like, let's do it.
Yeah, if it's going to be like 2, I'm excited because I'm sure it's going to be. But
because if it's 2 with better graphics and even more cool characters and even crazier story and all of it coming to a resolution finally, because let's be honest, this is just good storytelling, but like 4 has to end with something better happening than this because 3 is about as dark as it's ever been to this point.
Yes, it has.
So that going through that progression and finally getting to earn those moments will be phenomenal. I'm super excited about that. Any like predictions? I've already gone on my rope.
You've gone on record. I don't know. If I have any predictions per se. I'm not really good at the whole predicting thing. I just usually try to experience it in the moment. Mostly because I have no creativity with my predictions. So I'm just mostly excited to see where it goes because this was a very bleak ending. So I'm looking forward to see what happens to everyone after this. I'm assuming some will be able to escape, maybe, or no one escapes.
Everyone's dead.
Everyone's dead.
It's only the characters from Sky and Crossbell.
Dude, that would be interesting. Yeah, so I don't know. I'm just excited to see where it goes because they left it on a cliffhanger. Like, that was a very abrupt ending.
That's a worse cliffhanger than 1 for a lot of reasons.
That is worse. That's true. It is worse than 1.
In a both good and bad way. Primarily good, honestly, because it leaves off such a abrupt point that you're just left to question what's happening. But also because in 1 there was all this stuff happening rapid fire, but it was just kind of that one thing. Like all of a sudden robots, and now he's gone. Yeah. This. Think about how many unresolved questions there are.
So many, and that's like the biggest problem. Is like in 1 there were like a couple of unresolved things, but it was just this really like one thing. And now it's like there are 5 million unresolved threads on top of just this cliffhanger in the middle of this dialogue. Like it felt like the scene probably should have continued. Like at least in 1, it felt like that could be the ending of the scene. Like it kind of made sense. He's leaving. Goodbye. And then here it was like mid sentence. Black. Just like, okay. It was a little abrupt for me.
I sort of liked it, actually. I think I even said as much in the recording. I was kind of like, you know what? Yeah, right here. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Because at that point, with so much happening, what satisfactory leave-off point is there going to be?
Well,
and you can argue,
when you put it that way.
You can argue it could be better than that. Don't get me wrong. You could pick a different point where it sort of felt like a couple things were resolved, still leaving a lot of questions. But at this point, there's going to be so many threads that are unanswered that it's like, you know what? Leave them all unanswered. Give me nothing. I deserve nothing. Step on me. I don't care.
Step on you. That's not something I thought I'd hear tonight.
Well, here we are. That's how you know it's time to wrap things up if we're talking about people being stepped on. So that is our review of Trails of Cold Steel 3. Certainly recommended. Again, a game that we both enjoyed quite a bit. I don't want to speak for you, but given your score and the fact that you sat through a 110 part or 30 part, whatever, like, we love the series and we love the game. My complaints are more minor than they are major. And I expect that some of them will be addressed by what does happen in 4. So that'll also maybe retroactively look better down the road. Right. And, you know, my score is, I'm sure, biased because of the length of time that we spent on the game. I'm sure that's a factor. I'm sure if I actually sit down and play it, it might change. But as of right now, it's a pretty firm 7. Yeah, and I'm willing to modify my score down the road. You know, I've done that before, like when I gave Skyward Sword a 5 out of a 5, and now I regret it tremendously. But I've kept that review on the website because you have to stew in your regret. Yes. Similarly, you know, if I go through this and I play it on my own, which I'm going to do at my own pace now, so I can like read faster, that'll cut some time off, and I can do different scenes maybe to see other like social link stuff. That's a Persona term, you know what I mean. That also might improve it. So that's just the score having just beaten the game an hour ago. Because even though this is airing the day after the video comes out, we did all this like a week and a half ago. So we thought we'd do it while it was fresh. Over time, I might look back on it and be like, you know what? I kind of enjoyed the ride more than I gave it credit for. But at this particular moment, not knowing what happens in 4 and not having had a chance to play it myself at my own pace, that's the number. You know, and this is one of those spots where, especially as I get older, and you can, you know, see all the gray hair over there, like, I'm not willing to die on hills as prominently as I used to be. If somebody likes a thing I don't like, that's okay too. Yeah. If somebody loves a thing that I just kind of like or sort of like, I think it's good or really good but not great, that's okay too. I have no qualms with that. Don't yuck with other people's yums. It's true. But anyways, not a nice thing to do. We still have more Cold Steel 3 content coming. We will, once I've heard from people in the comments in the last video, the final part, as far as what we can and cannot watch for teasers, trailers, intro videos, etc. We'll be doing those. I actually intend to do them as we view them once and then kind of go through them like, I don't want to say frame by frame, but, you know, break down maybe each juncture a little bit. So we'll do full deep dives on those. We're going to go over the soundtrack sometime between now and the game comes out. 4, that is. So we have some more stuff coming from Cold Steel between now and the fall. And I think that's about it. Any last words for the viewers? Use is his best boy. You've wasted them on 4 words that should not have been had breath put through them and projected into the world. But there it is. That's all I got. It's okay. It's okay. He's growing on me. He is growing on me. That's good. I mean, that's like the best I could have wished for, and like even more. So I'm happy. Yeah, considering my stance on him in 1, I feel like I've come a long way as a person myself. 100%. I will go no further. Proud. This is where it stops. Look, I'm going to be honest with you. He won't be in my party in 4 unless the list is short. If we truly have these other characters all come in and stuff, and I have to choose between 7 people, there's no way in hell, even if I love his character, he's ever making the cut. So that's the only downside, is you can expect to see even less of him in 4. But I'll accept that. I used him a pretty decent amount in 3. And honestly, used him more than I was expecting, so that made me happy. I tried to throw you a bone. Yay!
I appreciated all of them.
I don't know what I got for it other than him being Snyder Marks and talking about his duty as a noble, but that's okay.
That's the essence of. That's the useless experience.
Yes. So that's the end of this episode. In between shows, you can find us on our website, objectionnetwork.com, on social media at Team Objection. Don't really bother, they're not updated. It's youtube.com/Objection Network for the playthrough that you've hopefully already watched for this game, so you're probably already here right now. And finally, you can send emails to the show to objectionnetwork@gmail.com. We'll be back on our regularly scheduled Thursday next week. We'll see you then.